Welcome to Artsy. I'm your host, Andrew Norris, and thank you for being here. This week, my guest is Stephen Teller. Stephen is mainly a muralist, but also a painter on canvas as well. And in this episode, he goes deep on the process of making a mural in terms of just how to set up, mock up, and complete a mural from start to finish the way that he does it. Everybody does it a little bit differently, I'm coming to find. But we go deep on that subject. Talk about procuring a wall to paint on, which has many iterations in it. We also talk about how Stephen came up through the festival art world and his background going to art school. And then we talk a little bit about the work itself. And I bring up some screen share action to take a look at his work on Instagram. That video will be available for every Patreon subscriber to check out. Speaking of Patreon, have a new subscriber this week. My 30th patron, getting close to $200 a month here. My 30th patron is Joyce Rainbow. You can find Joyce and her lovely artwork at Joyce Rainbow Art on Instagram. So thank you, Joyce. Big shouts to you. And if you're interested in supporting this podcast with a little bit of finances, for as low as $4 a month or $48 a year, you can join the ranks of people who are helping keep this project going. And I want to thank all my patrons. And I want to thank you for listening. If you'd like to help out, but don't feel inclined to open your wallet, give us a little share. Share it with your friends directly. I think that's the best way. Send them a message with a link to either Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you listen, wherever you think they listen. And just say, hey friend, I really like this episode of Artsy AF. I know that you're creative. I know that you're a little weird. I think that you would like it too. Otherwise, just happy to have you here. And enough babbling from me. Let's get into this episode with Stephen Teller. Stephen Teller, we finally did it, dude. We're finally recording.
We're here.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here, man. We just went through about 25 minutes of getting situated with the bandwidth and the sound. And, well, I'll just say that it's very important to be comfortable. And I'm really glad you're here. Thank you for being patient with all that. And
absolutely.
Stoked to have you.
Stoked to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, dude. So we're gonna go by the books today, and I wanna kind of just ask you about your story because I don't know about it. I think we met maybe 3 years ago, the first time I went to Halloween. But we never really sat down and chilled and talked about life and art and stuff. So I guess the first question I'll pose to you is, what was the seed of you wanting to be a painter? And you can go as far back into childhood as is necessary.
Down to the seed.
Yeah, down to the seed.
We're talking about seeds and growth. That's solid. It's a good metaphor. Basically, started really young. I can't even really remember any specific moment that art and the masters and the painters of society were there in my house as paintings. My grandmother was a painter.
Nice.
So I kind of grew up all the time with her paintings around the house, going to her house, and her drawings and paintings were up on the wall. So it was something that was normal, epic portraits. I don't have anything up right directly here, but epic portraits and drawings and figurative stuff. That was always there. And also my mom was, she was an art history major.
Nice.
So she just taught me about Van Gogh and Degas. Monet was like her favorite painting. She did like her master, like her thesis was on one of his paintings. Should know the name, don't. But it's just like things like that, I think, were always there. It wasn't like it was like I grew up into this like life of art. I think that it was just like part of their lives, like focusing on art, going to museums. My dad was also a designer, so a designer and a contractor. So he basically, started out being a contractor in New York and was kind of like grew into like these gigantic epic homes. So I think like seeing that, I like saw creative ideas start from like an idea into like a building. I realized that later that those were all like things that were kind of always there in my early life. So I think that art was always there, but then it wasn't a major focus until I got a little bit older. I knew all the master painters. I knew all that stuff. I kind of just like messed around with it, but I like to play sports and baseball and surfed and go to the beach. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So I kind of like grew up with a lot of different like creative things. We were skateboarding, building ramps out of scraps, and
nice, being
super mischievous and like coming up with crazy ways to like play the newest level of Ding Dong Ditch to like, it was always like a competition of like who could think of the next craziest thing. So
yeah,
I think like my group of friends too, we were very on that level of that kind of stuff too. It's just like skateboarding, pushing those levels. And so I think in high school, a couple of things like happened or maybe more like middle school, a couple of things happened at a few different kind of like levels at the same time. One was my neighbor, who is Christian Jacksheimer, First Earth.
Oh, really? You guys grew up together like that?
Yeah, he grew up across the street from me.
Oh, dope.
So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was an amazing person to like have as like, I was best friends with his younger brother, Bobby. So, and he has another brother, older brother, Evan. So my sister and we were like, we had a park in front of our house. So it was like football games and all kinds of, they were building ramps. It was me and Bobby, but they're playing video games, and we're always like super inspirational and just like everything that was happening in their lives. But he started to get really into his art. And then he went to Savannah College of Art and Design, but I just like watched him evolve as an artist. And I was in that ripe age of like 12 and 13 where I was like thinking about like a little bit of purpose and stuff like that. And we always just wanted to find the next coolest thing to do. So like when I saw that, I was like, whoa, how are you're drawing this thing out of your head? Like what is, that first moment where I had seen like MC Escher drawings and I had seen these things where I was like, oh my God, that's like, you're doing what those guys could do. Like these people that my mom always like introduced me to early on.
Yeah.
And so like, I was just like blown away. I was like, oh, what the fuck, dude? And I remember that was super inspirational. So I think I started drawing like right then a lot more, just kind of like doodles, and actually funny, like a lot of these shapes that I like repeat now. I think subconsciously that maybe happened, but then also I got kicked out of school in 6th grade for maybe something I might not say on the podcast, but
being too rad.
Being too rad, something like that.
Yeah.
Being a little bit, it was a little early for whatever, well, realistically, it's a great story. So I think it's actually great to share. We got like in trouble. Somebody had like weed in school, and it kind of like went around, and it was like this whole story that whatever. But so anyways, it was a terrible thing that happened in the moment. But like I went to this next school that I had a professor or a teacher there who the next school that I went to was this professor named Feldy, Alan Feldmesser, and he's a guy who I've been like just great friends with since. But he introduced me to like the band Fish. He introduced me to like drawing and like how to really start to hone in. And so they had a great program there. So like that fuck up turned into like something good, because right when I was ready to receive it, he was there to like guide me. So
That's awesome.
I kind of like quit playing sports and quit doing a lot of stuff, and basically just started focusing heavily on my art. Because I could kind of like see a glimpse in the veil, like things started to happen fast. So that was huge, having that guy basically all the way through high school. And I was like wanting to do like architecture, and, you know, it was like planted in my head that I had to like find a job thing.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Go for industrial design. I was like, oh, I could do yachts, and like, it was always about that. But I think later in high school, I started to kind of like break through on those thoughts and stuff, and exploring, you know, a little bit more around Florida, and kind of like just experiencing new things, to where I was kind of like realizing that things were possible to just kind of like follow your own path. So
totally.
I went to SCAD, and that was really huge.
Tell people what SCAD is for those who might not know.
So Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia, which, you know, a lot of good people were, you know, that you've actually had on the podcast have gone there.
Yeah.
I'd say probably Chris Bolin.
Yep.
Emily Kell.
Yep.
I guess I would have to go down the list to see if there's anybody else. But,
I'm trying to rack my brain right now too.
Yeah. Either way, that was like another just like kind of path in that direction. And my grandmother, who was like a painter, we were like connecting heavy at that point on. And I don't want to leave my other grandmother out. Actually, let me just reference her real quick.
Yeah.
She is majorly influential. Also, she was a Rockette. So like at like a young age, so she was just like on Broadway and in like, you know, doing advertisements and doing stuff like that, and was like super proud of it and confident.
Hell yeah.
You know, and was like, I did this. And so like that has always like rubbed off on me, I think, because she was just like, she's like, I'm rad. She was the first one on the dance floor at every wedding and stuff like that. So majorly helpful there. But and you know, so the both of them actually pushed me a lot into going to SCAD. And I kind of had one professor there who was I had a lot of professors who were influential, but I met one guy who was a painter who was able to communicate things to me that took my work to like another level.
Yeah.
That it hadn't gotten to in all of those kind of like years of almost diving in and wanting to be able to get to like that sort of realism and stuff. So there was definitely a lot of like these little like written moments, like, and then like I kind of convinced myself of it, as like with my grandmother, and it's like, I have to do this. She told me it's going to be, you know, so it's like a pressure, but like it's all good, man. It's like, just stick with that. She said, you're going to be epic. So just like, you're going to be epic. So just try to stick, you know, it's because there's tons of those moments where you're like, especially even pursuing going to school for art and you know, in general, and like, so there's lots of moments you got to just trust in that faith. I kind of went for like a long moment there, so I don't know.
No, that's good. Yeah. I can jump in. There's a few things that might be good to drill down into a little bit. Like, first of all, the whole confidence thing. Well, actually, let's back up. The fact that you sort of had these realizations when you were still at first in middle school, and then in high school, and then it like sort of started to reveal itself, your interest for art and what might be there, and the fact that you grew up across the street from Christian, another artist in our scene, First Earth, for people who don't know. It's all these little events and situations always fascinate me, because they kind of, like, if you are a stream of water, it's like the ground in which you're flowing over, right? And to have that sort of realization dawn on you at that young age, I think it's pretty special. It seems like you were almost born to be an artist too, with like your grandmother was a painter, mom was art historian, dad was a designer. Yeah, I just want to highlight that whole thing because you still could have possibly just gotten really into skateboarding or really into surfing or really into like playing pranks or something, like just doing
So all
mischievous
those things
shit.
are actually still in the back of my mind. I
Yeah,
still want to do every one of those things. I'm like, ooh, I can go
one
surfing for the
day.
rest of my life. Shit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, totally. Yeah, dude. I think environment is key for sure.
Mhm.
Basically what you're talking about is like synchronicities and like how those
100%.
things like line up. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to like, I think sometimes it's easier to like look back at it and like create that storyline.
Yeah.
But that's also sometimes like you have to take the step back and like look at it and be like, how did you get here? Like how are these experiences lining up? And honestly, yeah, I think like I live a lot of my life on those like synchronicity moments where you're like, the best. I just thought of like the funniest one that like where you have these little moments of like you say something and like it's on the TV next to you,
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
same time, you're like, that's when you're like making those good decisions and you're following your gut and you're like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm going with that. And like,
Yeah.
so it'll reassure you. But like my favorite one I've ever done is I was in California. I was like traveling around and I was like driving into San Francisco and I'm listening to like Grateful Dead, this classic Casey
Yeah.
Jones. And it's like, Casey Jones, you better watch out. And it's like police things like your speed 56 miles an hour. I was like, oh shit, I'm like, slow down. And I was like, but like, those you
Yeah,
notice
yeah.
that it's like the words just get filled in. Those are
100%.
definitely like, yeah, I vibe on that like 100% to get, that's how I keep like faith in like what I'm doing,
Yeah.
because you got to find like that confidence and you got to find some things to where it's like you boost yourself up. There's only like so much thought, like so many places you can get to like mentally,
Mhm.
just like on your own. You got to feed it, dude. You got to feed it with like all sorts of stuff, reading and proper like rest and time away, and
Yeah, yeah.
just giving yourself the fuel. So it's like, um yeah, man, it's a big part of it. But believing in what you're doing is the hardest part too, because I think we all get lost in like the question of like what is my art and like what am I doing. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think that ends up like that's like the one of the hardest things for I think young artists and people like trying to find what they're doing is like, that you could like look at styles and like, there's so many ways that people do things. And I think that it's like a tough thing for a lot of painters too, is like just finding your path, but then like looking back at your storyline and like seeing like how you got where you are is like that's when you can like see it properly. Then it like you start to make the work about it and all those things start to come together. Very abstract way of
No,
that I'm talking about here,
I
but
get it.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that
yeah,
we're really good at telling ourselves stories, right? And the more you can draw from in your own story, the more rich I think your art will be. And I also wanted to talk about the confidence thing that you mentioned with your grandmother, who is a rockette, which, I mean, I think you and I are about the same age, so that would like make her kind of like, it's sort of groundbreaking for a woman to be in show business back in those days, I feel like. And
yeah, definitely, definitely.
I do think that I think that there are some really, really great artists out there who just have trouble with confidence or like putting themselves out there. So I think that that's like, you know, it's like the whole being afraid of people watching you or sort of getting anxious about bearing your soul through your art. And it's just super important to find confidence wherever you can. And I think that
Yeah,
what you were
absolutely.
saying, like having a story that you can look back on and notice all these moments of synchronicity can actually like fuel you a little more and like really solidify your purpose. Yeah.
Definitely. It's yeah, there can be like some pressure in that, it's like not easy to do, but it's really important to like take those steps back and like work on that kind of stuff mentally, to like take the path to look at, what went on and how did you get to where you are and stuff. But I was going to go back to something you said at the beginning, was just like, there are moments where like having confidence is good, but also not like, you don't have to like, you're an artist, you're listening to this, you don't have to be like, oh, I know what I want to do and everything like that. I read a lot of books that are just like talking about like, there's one thing about going out and getting your art out into the world too soon, is like a lot of things can happen, is like you may not have developed into the place you're supposed to yet. So you may get shot down, you may get widely accepted, and sometimes that might not be good either, because you might have not developed into the place that you were supposed to get to or can get to. Right. Which I think that's a side discussion, is like, I think that's happening a lot in the NFT thing right now with certain things, but that's a whole another thing. But so like honing your skills is like a huge thing. You don't know what you want to paint, you don't know what you want to do, just make stuff, just make a shitload of work, like a ridiculously terrible amount of work, so that like you start to see those little glimpses, because like not everything's going to be good. Like not everything I design now is like, I go through a design and I'm like, wow, it's like every other one I do is like, one's good, one's okay, one's really good, pushes the limits, and one's like, I backtrack and go in these little cycles. So you have to like make a bunch of stuff and then like look at it from, walk away, and like, what's your first opinion when you see that, those canvases, like, what does that look like? And you're like, I like this like square inch right here, and like run with that, and then like themes happen and you start to roll, and you just like, it's not you, man. Like, it's like, you're the vessel, that goes back to this, like a TED talk with like Elizabeth Gilbert that talks about the elusive creative genius, and how like, you're just, you're basically, back in the day, like Romans and Greeks, like you thought that like the genius was like a part of you, that you're right there. So it rolls through you. And I think like she says, like in the Renaissance, they start to like, attribute it more to the artist, like he's a genius. So that's like, that's pressure on you, like walk in and do it. So, and be able to like snap your fingers and boom, make magic. That's definitely not how it is. Like, you have to like get in tune with like, when you create the best, by creating a lot, you're like, oh, I noticed I work better when I do it like this. And, if I have waves for a week that are like amazing, I'm actually pointing behind me because I'm like, I'm in St. Augustine, I'm close to the beach. So but like, if there's like waves for a week and I'm all fueled up with like the things that I know, like get me just stoked on life, I like go in that design and I'm like, design like 5 minutes. And it's like the best thing I made. And I'm like, it's all about just seeing how you flow the best and fueling it up.
Yeah.
It's the hardest thing to do, but like the more you just like focus on what you're doing, takes time, man. It takes years and years and years, but you like see, eventually you're like, damn, I work really well in that position. And then you see it happen again. So like, create those scenarios that like set you up for the most success, and then develop that. Then the confidence will come through that. I think it's like, just explore.
Yeah.
Trust that you're going to just get somewhere, and then just like, then everything's chill. Like, that's the whole thing.
Yeah. I think that's what you were saying is true, that's kind of the life around making the art is also a process, right? And you have to go out and experience it, and then bring it home, sort of transmute it onto the canvas or transcribe it into words or music. And finding your flow is, for me at least, has been actually the most difficult thing, because the art, after you do it long enough, you sort of just know how to do it. But it is a lot about just feeling good, and like when it comes easy and frequently and you're in that flow, I mean, like getting situated, like to throw it back to before we even started today, we had to get situated, and now everything is actually like happening. It makes it a lot easier, because, you know, people aren't going to be interested in this, but whatever. I can't hear myself echoing through your speaker and like everything's nice and tight and it's how
Yeah.
you want it. And like setting up the situation for the art to happen, you don't force it, right? You're not like, oh, I'm gonna like just impose my will and put out all these paintings and make people buy them. No, it's like you sort of just cultivate a situation or an environment where that can actually flourish. Um,
Yeah, my heart started beating just when you started saying that, because that shit will drive you nuts, dude.
yeah, yeah,
Trying to like, you know, every painting you make, like there's a big pressure, I think, in like, you know, talking to like the festival scene. I think that
yeah.
there's like this big pressure to follow like this model that
Hmm.
people are kind of creative. Like you have your canvases, you have your prints, and like every painting you do, you make a print of. And, you know, so people are starting to do a lot more like limited editions and
Hmm.
build out on all these different kinds of products and new kinds of things. But I think that there's like very much a model that kind of people follow. And I'm not knocking it in any way. I'm not even saying, you know, there's anything bad, but I think that I think a lot of our, you know, our listeners are kind of like, not necessarily, I don't know why I say the festival scene, but
I
I
mean,
think a lot of the artists that are kind of like have started there, and at least, you know, it's that kind minded audience. But I think it's like important to like just find your own path of what it's going to work with, you know.
yeah,
What are you interested in? There's, you know, there's the style, and there's those influences are like good to draw from, but like, you know, it's not a pressure. It's just like those fun questions of like, ask yourself like a basic questionnaire of just like,
yeah,
what's one of my favorite things to do, man? Like what's just things like that is just, it's so overlooked, but like you just analyze those basics and it starts to really like
I
key
agree.
up and you see it clearly.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think that anytime you have like kind of a group think situation, you can get sort of stuck in a rut of like how to do things or you know, taste and aesthetic. And sometimes, you know, what you think might be your taste might be completely influenced by the people who you surround yourself with. And even like you were saying, like how to do things. It just it's just always a good practice to like question your assumptions and look around and see it, do I like this or am I just trying to fit in? You know, I think that that's a
Absolutely.
very good point.
And I think that was a big part in my success, actually, was like if I my story of like kind of where we were starting with
Yeah,
was like I kind of stopped when I was talking about SCAD and Savannah. And
right. We should jump back into
but
that.
yeah, it's actually, the evolution is like we're in a perfect spot right there, because the evolution of kind of like where I went after that. Hold on, I'm gonna shut this fan off right here.
Alrighty.
Little Florida boy is getting cold, boy. So yeah, like after I was in school, you know, I was like knew how to make my work and stuff, and I was like, okay, you know, I was starting to go to Swanee because it was pretty close. I was going to Bear Creek's Swanee Festival, and like, you know, so that was like already starting to do that in school, and seeing like Christian live painting at places around Savannah,
Hmm.
and blowing my mind still, just like, you know, even though I've had progressed to where I was, just still just always blowing my mind. Um, so I saw those models and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna I just like loved going to see the band Fish.
Yeah.
So I just like got out of school and I was like, dude, you know what, they're playing 30 shows across the country. I'm just gonna make a couple. Like I saw, actually, there's this one dude named David Drennan, and he's the guy. He's got like you've definitely seen him. He's got these black and white lithograph posters of like
The band.
Jerry and just
Oh yeah.
like, yeah, every person. And he's been around the scene forever, and a lot of people have his work. And I remember I was at All Good 2011,
Hmm.
and I like see him drop in and sell like 15 posters to this group of people, and my mind was just like, oh my god. I was like, I could do that, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I made Fish posters, a couple of posters, and like went on tour, and I was just like the first show. I think I like did the math, went through a spreadsheet because it's always a good plan, budget things out. I like made an Excel spreadsheet how much
That's
other show is gonna
smart
be.
as fuck, dude. That's so smart.
Yeah, dude.
I definitely did
Yeah, because
not
I was like,
ever do that. I
yeah, it's like how much do I need to make to get going? I got like $600 at the beginning.
yeah, yeah.
If I by show 5, if I've made this much, like I'll catch up, So I had to sell like 12 posters a show. I think the first show I sold like 39 posters, and I was like, dude, what? So by the end of the
Sweet.
tour, I made like $4,000,
Nice.
and I was just like, oh my God, what is going on? So like from there, basically, I was just like selling posters, going to festivals, like bootlegging posters, and just like,
Yeah.
but there's crowds, there's people out there. So I was you look at the situation, I'd be like, man, there's 25,000 people at this thing. Like if I can
Yeah.
get to almost every one of these things, I was like methodical about it.
Yeah.
I'd print like 500 posters. Again, took this model from Christian because like just always like
Were you on foot?
good inspirations.
Were you on foot?
Yeah, on foot.
Nice.
Yeah, I would go on foot, and I would just like I'd go to like 6 festivals a year. I'd go to more, but like I'd make like 400 posters or 500 posters for that, and I would kind of just like go crush it. And that was like my way to like keep practicing, my work. And I put in like tons of sacrifices, like I went to California, I did the weed thing for like several years in Lake Tahoe.
Trimming,
took huge risks.
gardening,
trimming, doing. At that time it was like 2012, so it was like the end of like those golden years of it, and I was like, getting out there meeting all these old heads, and they're like, oh, this is the end of this. So I was like, well, I'm trying to, but my mindset was like, I'm buying myself time because I'm just going to keep working and working and working. I'm like, I was making sacrifices, and like, I'm not saying go make bad, illegal, like sacrifices. Well, not like it was like illegal either. It was just like, there was
like
this situation that was like, yeah, exactly. Like, and that's kind of like, I've always not to like put shade on myself, but like, there's lots of moments in life where there are like these gray areas, and like, don't be like afraid to like walk the path of like that,
the middle,
like be confident. Nobody's telling you not to. Like the guy telling you not to, you're telling to do it. So it's like in that moment, like, and I think like I see those moments a lot, and I try to be like, not a dick, but like just own through those moments. So that happens a lot. And so like, I was in, California, and was like doing that, taking that time, and buying time for myself. But then after doing so much of like trying to sell the paintings, like every painting I'd make a canvas print and make a thing. And I was trying to sell stuff online and work in my studio. And I was just kind of like going nuts at that time. It was so much about like people growing their Facebook pages. Instagram was just getting like as growing, it wasn't like a working system as it is like now, kind of.
Yeah.
So I was like going, I still have stacks of like canvas prints that are from like then that never really sold. And I'm just like, I can't put the energy into that because there's so much perpetuation. So I was studying more business and kind of learning more about online sales and the right ways to like have your Facebook set up so that you can, just collect leads and do email marketing and all those kinds of things, and like doing more business pivots to where I realized that like, just for me personally and the way I work and like what I fuel off of is like going out and going around. I was noticing like just being in the studio wasn't going to cut it for me. So like, I was just like, I'm just going to start focusing more on doing murals. And like that moment was like a huge moment for me pivot wise, because I was just like, I enjoy that scale. There was just like something I've been painting for so long, and there's just like something I like coming back to the studio, but like there was nothing to like pull out of me personally.
Yeah.
So I realized for myself, like, that's just who I am as an artist. And those are like the moments you gotta like, how do you work best? I'm not that guy. I'm like, I see people doing shit. I'm like, damn, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But I do this.
Right. And people look at you and they're like, oh man, how do you even do that? And this is the perfect segue too. Because first I'll call it back to kind of the surfing and skateboarding thing, and like comparing that to making a mural, right? Like they're both very physical, very big movements, typically comparatively, at least, to like a tiny little paintbrush, wrist, or like slightly moving your shoulder a couple degrees. A lot of times you're like just filling in, whether it's with a roller or a spray can. You know, you get this like, I'm really feeling like the flow when you start talking about like going out there, sort of like interfacing with the public in a lot of ways, in the same vein as you did when you were going on tour, right? Like, I'm sure that
Yeah, actually.
like making a mural affords you plenty of
Hmm.
people walking up and, you know, connect, being able to connect with them on that level, huh?
Yeah, honestly, there's a huge parallel that you just drew that I didn't even kind of realize is how much I fuel off of just like talking to random people and seeing what like this random person can say. You know,
Hmm.
like you go through the masses of people and like gems of moments shine out from
Yeah.
people. And yeah, that's definitely something I fuel on heavily. Um, but yeah, doing a mural, I love painting huge because yeah, you're talking about painting small to painting big. Yeah, you paint like a highlight on a nose and it's like this big, you
Yeah,
know, and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just kind of like compare if it's like a 20-foot thing. I'm not saying it's like it's easy, but like there's just like a tightness and like a that I have a hard time getting back into is painting small
Hmm.
when I
When you're,
am so like yeah my body is very expressive, so like talking about surfing, you know, I'm a very active person, you know,
hmm.
like I'm always doing stuff and you know like to just be probably pushing myself way too hard lately and I've kind of been realizing that, but yeah, painting a mural like it tests the body too, so I think
100%.
doing a little bit of it's like almost doing like sculpture work or something. It's like a way to like this is bigger than me now, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And I've always kind of felt that way about my, you know, like wanting that feeling out of my art, I think, to
Hmm.
where it can like serve a bigger purpose. Cause like public art, you know, it, it serves a big purpose and there's like a layer of responsibility with it too.
I
Um,
agree.
so that's kind of like into a different subject. Maybe we can kind of, I'll circle back,
We'll
but
put a
like,
pin in that. Yeah.
yeah, I kind of was so, but like talking about the mural process, and you know, it's very much does relate. You know, it's like very similar to painting a painting on canvas, but like
Yeah.
the main difference is like planning. Really, you know, obviously you have to have the skills to paint big and stuff, but like anybody who's trying to wanting, you know, I get the question a lot. Is like I paint and I want to paint murals.
Yes.
Like you already know how. Like I usually tell them, I'm like, you paint? I'm like, okay, well, you already know how to paint a mural.
Right.
Like just expand what you do already into like bigger everything and like
Yeah.
and plan more, you know? And then it's the same thing, basically. You know, that sounds easy, but that's like what somebody told me a long time ago. I could drop another good name is Efren, Everyday Research,
Hmm.
epic mural painter, and I saw him do something in I saw him like painting in at Aura one year, and he was like painting just with spray paint and just like busting stuff out like nobody else had ever done at Swanee in a way. And I was just like, dude, okay, I'm doing the wrong thing, you know? And then
Right. Yeah.
he said to me, he's like, oh, you already grid this out, you already do it. So, um, you know, it's a doable thing, totally.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I think it would be super interesting and helpful for a lot of the people listening to just let's walk through the process of starting and completing a mural, and we can start with, I think for me the trickiest part of all is finding a wall, procuring a wall to paint on, or
Yeah.
even if it's just you know, some wall that no one cares about. You know, it's in an abandoned lot. That is doesn't take much imagination to figure out. But like as far as like approaching a business or doing it for either s- some kind of financial compensation or just material compensation, how does one start to go about procuring a wall?
Yeah. You kind of touched on like the evolution of those different like levels of what you're searching for out of it
Mm-hmm.
and what's kind of coming to you out of it. Basically, yeah, when you paint your first pieces, like the idea is to like, you're going to self-fund those moments. So,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you have a wall, it's just like in your studio. Maybe you have a wall in your backyard or on a fence or in a place that your landlord's just like, yeah, you paint that, just paint over it or whatever. To like test it out. Or like, if you're already like a painter who knows and you're confident, you want to go out somewhere and like you see a wall, you're driving down the road and you're like, damn, that's like a great wall. Once you start to look for them, you're like, you drive through a building, you're like a city and you're like, oh my God, that wall is like, that'd be epic. So anyways, basically like a great way to just like do that sometimes is like for people, I always say this, like, when people talk to me about like getting into painting murals, it's like, it's totally okay to like pay your dues at the beginning. So like, meaning like self-fund, but like give it, it's got to be good situations. So like that is actually going to help you. If you need to practice outside, having a practice wall, put up a couple of pieces of wood and plywood, get 2 pieces of plywood and put them together, whatever, in a certain way, stick them into the ground with beams. Just, I've seen people do that. And that's like a great way to just hone the skills again. But procuring a wall, you could talk to business owners is always the best way. Be confident, walk inside, be like, hey, it's an awesome wall that you have outside. Are you ever interested in having a mural painted on it? And they'd be like, are you the manager? Do you own this place? People don't really mind to talk to people if you're nice to them. So,
right, yeah.
So, sometimes you may get, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Or they may be like, oh my God, that's awesome. I was just thinking about that, which those little synchronicities, you'd be like, oh, wow, I bet you anything that's what happens. If you're thinking of doing it, it's going to work like that. So, yeah. So, those are good ways to just start. And then just like, you take a picture of the wall, you take the measure. I do it, there's a difference of like the squiggle grids or like, which is another, conversation, but how to scale up your thing. I measure everything out. So you measure the space, you go onto however you prepare your images. Maybe you just do sketches. I do everything on Photoshop before I paint anything. It's fully planned.
You're a Photoshop guy.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Like every little bit is based like, because that goes towards my theory of how I've evolved to where I'm at. But like, yeah, it's it's design and execution once you get to a certain level in the process. But so yeah, talking about that, yeah, you could go to Photoshop, you design your image or you do your drawing and then you take a picture of it, put it onto a program like that, so you can open the file of the wall, in like 3/4 view, and then you like you hit like command, free transform and command and spin it, make it look like it's on the wall and like, make it a little bit transparent so it like fits the situation. And that's a great way to like bring into places. So every time I do a mock-up, I design it fully on Photoshop. I have my conversations with the client and stuff, which, but like I do it on Photoshop, I mock it up and I present it. And that's the best way to like give them everything that they need to see to be convinced that like this is a good situation for them as well.
So I wanted to ask about the process in Photoshop for you in particular. Are you compositing with different images, or are you drawing everything out and then filling it in?
No, basically like take pictures of mostly everything, unless I'm in like a bind and I'm just going to find some open source images on a website that I'm like, pay for or whatever. Which is a whole nother thing, is talking about reference images in your paintings. I know that's a conversation people definitely are scared about, but definitely finding like open source images or just taking your own pictures really leads to a lot of things. But like,
for sure,
I'll go to the florist and get some pictures. It all just depends. But yeah, I basically am like compositing images, and I have my ways that I kind of like flip the color schemes and little areas of, black and white and stuff like that, and kind of repetitive themes. But that kind of all came through doing it on Photoshop for me, is I needed to see it before I did it on canvas. I could only 100%. Go so far, experiment. Yeah, I could only go so far. So I think that planning for murals made my paintings better too, because for me personally, I just realized I just work better like being able to just experiment like off the wall on the computer And then technically being able to execute it is another thing. But so yeah, I mock it up completely, photos, and then, fill in spaces and use the gradients and stuff. But I make that 100% my reference, and I make it to scale of the wall. So I'll, they'll give me a measurement of the wall nowadays. So I went from doing a lot of those, sorry to jump around here, but I went from doing a lot of those jobs or a lot of doing those projects where I'd go to mural festivals and I would go to, which some of them have some funding, kind of just going around as much as I can and putting up the pieces and like, curating it cleanly to where, a lot of the things I was doing on like my social media and stuff, it seems like maybe potentially, that's great to send out a level of ambiguity where you're just like, big thank you to having me out. So, fake it till you make it is one thing too. Just get there, convince yourself that you're in that position too. And then it's going to kind of like roll with it. But I went with a lot of those opportunities, and now I've done so many pieces in so many places that like they're basically billboards for themselves.
100%.
So there's constantly a flow of inquiries of, hey, I have this wall, can you do it? And I'm getting a lot better at being like, that doesn't work for my schedule, that's not
saying no
enough. Yeah, saying no, where before I'd be like, oh my God,
any and all.
Yes. And I'm like, oh, I'm dying,
Yeah.
So it evolves. So like, if you want them to get seen, like you think you're a good painter and you can do it, like there's a lot of people in the mural scene, there's a lot of things happening, but like if you're confident and you get some work up and you design and curate it well and get out there and just like, apply to those mural festivals, look on Instagram, find the different festivals that are on these different levels of like, there's like these high tiered ones that have like some of the best, most prestigious artists that we all know. And then there's things that like just happen where it's like fund your own wall, but that's the best way you connect with people, you connect with other artists. Opportunities come like that, they share your work, you share your work. If the thing about community is that if you're getting the check, I'm getting the check,
that's right.
So like you have to create that level of standard then too. So if we're talking about the business of like the murals and stuff, it's like, I'm getting into a point where I've been saying yes to a lot of opportunities. And then I get in that moment and realize like, oh, maybe I'm in a business that I short-handed myself. Like I look around, I'm like, fuck, that construction guy is like doing better than I am on this. And I'm like, fuck, I did it again, And so like, know your value and like, look around at what other people are doing in the community, talk about those things, talk about like, the design fees, talk about your square footage price, and like, don't be afraid to talk to your clients about it too, is like, say, hey, these are the potential charges. I want to charge you this. But if it's going to be this, and this, these are situations. And the more you just like learn how to openly communicate with your clients and stuff like that.
Yeah.
As well as like set boundaries, so
100%
saying no to projects that don't, necessarily feed your artistic vision. You'll start to figure out the language that's like the best to like, how do you talk to clients and how do you say like, I don't want to take a project if you're going to tell me what to do. Nobody wants to hear that, but like you start to get the language of like, okay, your best way you can get the most value out of what you see I do already is if you give me, what I say to my clients now is like, give me an emotion you want to feel, how do you want this to be received? I do not want you to tell me what to paint. I want you to tell me what you want to feel, who are we talking to? What's our main audience? All of those kinds of things. So where it's like, they can feed your creative vision. Obviously this is like the ideal situation, but the more you push for it, the more it's going to come to your way. And then those clients they want to hear that. They want to hear that you know what they want.
Yes.
So like, and when you represent that, that's what ends up happening.
Yes. So yeah,
it fuels both ways.
Yeah.
They know that,
Yeah. A few things on that came to mind. No, you're fine. I love it. You've got a wealth of information in there, and just like, again, let it rip, But a few things that come to mind for me is, first, I think that if you're ever going to make art for exposure, the only appropriate time to do it is when it's on a gigantic wall somewhere where there's either a lot of traffic or foot traffic, right? And if you have to self-fund, like you were talking about in the beginning, if you have to self-fund some of that, I mean, that's kind of like advertising that you paid for that could potentially live there in, I don't know, perpetuity, hopefully, as long as that wall is still there. Um, and then to kind of go onto a different level of artistry, perhaps. Um, the thing that you said about communication is so important because that is something that every human should learn how to do effectively. And as artists, I don't think that we value our work well enough, even when we're at a proficient or distinguished level. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing of like saying yes to everything and not being clear about how it's going to go down. Uh, and I think that if you're talking to a business owner, they respect someone who's kind of got a little swagger and a little like a little firmness on their side, right? Like they don't want someone to be a pushover, and then that just gets weird, right? Um, and then a third thing is when you're talking about sort of telling the client, asking them sort of to evoke an emotion or sort of ask who the audience is. I think that can be translated into commission work for people just making stuff on canvas too. There are a lot of ways that you can sort of like screw yourself taking on commissions, you know, um, where you're designing it or you're making it and you show some progress pics and then it almost can turn into like you're a designer at that point, like, and someone's uh, asking you to design their trip, basically. Do you ever get that? Like, kind of going
Yeah.
back to the festival world where someone's like, "Man, I've got this
Oh
great
yeah.
commission for you, and it's about my ayahuasca experience." And there was
Oh
my
yeah.
grandmother, and she had steel wings, and there was a jaguar. She was riding a jaguar, and she was battling Donald Trump, and you're just like, I can't cram that into even a 3 by 4 foot painting, man. Like,
Yeah.
give me 5 colors or give me 5 words or less, and I'll make you something. If you like what I do, you like what I do. I'm not going to, maybe you should be the artist at this point with this wild vision, you know?
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. Totally. What was the first you said, like talking about commissions and stuff? What was the first thing you said on that thing?
oh,
Was you're talking about
communication.
like saying communication?
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
That we could definitely drill down into that for a long time, I'm sure.
Well, I think that for me actually came from I left something out as I was doing a lot of doing all these festivals and stuff. Is
Yeah.
I was always seeing like somebody would do it like this, and I hate to like it always comes when I say it out loud. I'm like, you sound like a cocky dick, but like, you know, I'd see people do things and I'm like, why would you do it this way? Like, why can't we, so I always was just like, I want to start to get some galleries and figure it out. So I did like summer camp, music festival for like a couple of years after being an artist there and kind of like got to evolve the space. And one thing I noticed like about every festival is like, you'd walk in with like no idea what's going to happen, and like
Yeah.
you have all these questions. I'd see like all my friends, you'd prepare this way, but then it ended up being like this. And everybody's just like, there's all these levels to where like you're an artist, you should be like, it's just, you got to set it up to like where these people, it's just easier. And the main way to do that was just communication, like
Yes.
how to communicate thoroughly to like 15 people coming into a festival, check in, where to park, where to drive, exactly, every little moment to like curate the experience to where it's like all these things are taken care of, you know.
That is so
And so
important.
this actually like this all like wraps into like the whole paying your dues and when to do things for exposure. So like, doing the festivals, and then like I moved over to Sewanee Halloween after, I did a few years up in summer camp, and it was in Illinois, so it was a long drive every year, but epic program. And I learned under some really good people about communication and about like how to just like, curate the experience. And just like, there's so many ways to, like even just like working in Google Docs and being really organized in the way that you do your stuff, and like write everything down and like create files and create systems that like help back you up so that you don't have to deal with it,
Yeah.
But so those moments like helped me a lot with those communications. And I think like, that I noticed some artists who are like very communicative, and some that kind of just like, you go back and you're like, dude, you asked me a question. I'm like, hey, did you read the email? So it's always a thing, like, read stuff over and like try to be that open communication, because then when you have those jobs and when things start to come later, you'll be able to like express yourself clearly. And that's huge. But then, so going to talking about the exposure thing, and about doing those walls, is like a lot of these festivals, this is a big conversation I have a lot of the time. Doing festivals and being the gallery managers, like sometimes people would want you to like pay to be like the live artist, and I'm like, do y'all even understand like how ridiculous that sounds? But like, the thing that happens is a lot of artists just want to paint at festivals. So we have this thing where we do it a lot for free, and it's been something we've done for a long time.
Yeah.
But then like, we're trying to say, oh, well, the festival should charge us, so give us something. And then there's some that do, and things that are getting better. And I think that now that all these artists that were younger and were like painting are like growing up to be in charge of all these programs, like things are shifting, especially post-COVID. Like, I think that we all should be getting paid on all tiers. And if you're not, I don't want to be the guy who influences, but we have to like, as a team, like create some sort of like influence to where it's like, we all do want to paint, and it is a huge inspirational moment. But like, I don't know, it's hard to draw the line, because for painting murals, when you see a good opportunity, when you see a good wall where thousands of people drive past that a day, when you invest for those moments, you get to get those followers, and you see things. And going back to like planting a seed, it's like, when you are feeling like you're in the moment to express yourself in that way, and you're confident enough, it's like someone's going to vibe on that. And if you stay doing it for long enough, that shit's going to circle back around. You're going to be like, no way, I can't believe it. That thing from all the way back then, they saw that one and they want one now. And they saw another thing happen, and then it convinced them. So, but there, in the festival scene too, it's like, if you stand out as an artist and you connect with people and you vibe on that moment, you're going to get a lot of followers. You're going to get people who want to see your work. And you have to create a romantic experience for people. I think like people want to feel like in what you're doing. That's what's so good about like the Instagram stories, and like, and what we can do with social media now is like, for business wise, like, and for just like selling, and just like, you're selling the experience that you're going through. Like, you're selling all of that to somebody. They want to be romanticized, so like, be emotional and be authentic through all that stuff. And like, people will just like, it'll fuel them up. There's moments in this festival world too, where it's like, the exposure is good if it's like the right moments. But I think things are shifting a lot. I don't know what you're going to say, but I think things are shifting a lot too in the festival world, where it's like focusing towards a lot of mural things too. We're all growing. A lot of people, all these painters and everybody are focusing into the world of murals, because it's becoming more publicly accepted and more across the board. So, that whole paying your dues thing is just like, analyze the situation, and like, if you feel it, fund it. I paid for a ton of walls, paid for the paint, the lift, the whole thing, $1,200, boom, do it. Doesn't matter, because that like, it's gonna, that's a lot of money to like come up with all the time, but like, paint with house paint in black and white, do it. Let those moments dictate what you do, see it and flow with it. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention is that when you were talking about getting people in that moment and sort of romanticizing the experience of being at a festival, I think that's very important to remember. Very important to connect with people that will help you, that will help your art, that helps them. Um, and really, I think I've said this before on the show, but you're not really selling someone the piece of art per se. You're selling them the experience of buying the piece of art, and then you're selling them on the idea of their future self hanging that piece of art in their home, and then that piece of art enriching their life and reminding them of that time where, fill in the blank, they had a great experience at X, or they really connected with the artist. So I think that's just I just kind of wanted to underline that point, for sure. And then the whole thing with festival art, and standardization, I guess we could call it that. I don't know. Um, just a thought that came to mind is you know in the music world, people pay their dues, and then if their music is connecting and hitting with the whatever target demographic, then they get, eventually higher and higher up on that lineup. And I'm sure they're getting paid more and more each time. And I, I don't know all the ins and outs of production budgets and art budgets and all that. And I know that's a bitch. And
It's tough,
my,
actually. Yeah.
I really respect, like, I worked at Sonic Bloom a couple years, sort of like, this was way back in 2015 was the last time, but helping build the gallery, just kind of like seeing the behind the scenes on production, and then like learning how much the person who was running the gallery was actually getting. And I was just like, oh shit, that's not anything really. Um, so this kind of comes back to the whole like being able to say no and being firm, and you don't, it doesn't mean you have to abandon the festival art world altogether. I mean,
No.
there are plenty of opportunities as an artist grows, as their work becomes more refined, as they get more experience. There's plenty of opportunities you can find to where you can get compensated in a way that feels right. And like you were talking about curating that experience, it's so important because like if I'm not getting paid, okay, that's one thing. But if I'm not getting paid and I decide to go to a festival with 5,000 people and there's 20 other live painters, you know, you just kind of got to do the math. Then it's sort of my fault, right? Or if, you can get
Totally.
compensated in other ways, like at Electric Forest, we get, a giant shaded tent and meals all week and a little bit of gas money, and there's 50,000 people there, and there's 10 live painters. So it's like, you just have to be
That
thinking about these
right.
things.
Absolutely. That's a good situation. And that may be like, a harder place to get into or something like that. But,
I'm
um,
lucky. I'll go
definitely.
ahead and admit that on that one. Like,
Yeah, when you get your in sometimes too, it's
yeah.
like sometimes it's not about how like good your work is. It's like, I apply to all these different public art grants now,
Mm,
and I'll make like a design where I'm like, oh, I got this. Like it's so sick.
hmm.
And then they don't accept it. And I'm like, damn, like, okay, whatever. And then they just say, like this guy just happened to like this more. So it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like, it's all hit or miss. And it's like getting package yourself up nice, and like get out there and do it. But yeah, pick the right things. It's the same in the mural thing is it's like pick the right opportunities to like fund it, and do it.
Hmm.
And, even like shaping the way that the path that you're going to take, see how other people are going to do it. And then like, curate it to yourself on like how you associate different stuff to it. But like, it's great to look at what other people have done to see like where you're going to go. You know, like I talk about Christian and First Earth and a lot of like the steps that he took to see like, okay, well, how does that work for me more? And like, you know, so be influenced but like, yeah,
Yeah.
I think, be like going to the commission thing that you mentioned before is like, we're talking about like knowing, you know, being able to say no to stuff or like doing what you want to do, which is like your authentic artist self. You may not know what that is, but like if it feels good or feels like you're like, I want to do this because of the money, but I don't want to do it. Honestly, like if you're working hard and you're confident, like you want to take them because of the money, but like if you tell yourself that if you focused on your path, like it may be hard in those moments, but like it will start to cycle, you know? So I like, that's that leap moment, like taking the leap of like, you know, I used to do like holiday portraits and stuff like that. And I'd be like painting in my studio of like this person. And I'm just like, oh my God, why did I do this again? It's like, you know, I'm in here for like 3 weeks painting this portrait of this person. I'm like, I could have made this and this and that.
Yeah.
And all those surges and moments of like my inspiration, like came and went because I wasn't like being true to like following through with that kind of thing. And like, so that's hard with commissions is, you know,
Finding
if
that
it's
balance.
like, yeah, it's hard, you know, it's just like a hard thing. You got to pay, but you got to pay your dues, you know? So if you're painting a painting and that's what's making you money, that's fucking awesome. Then you're getting paid for that. So like but you gotta, you know, if there's another mission is like all of these little things are like those small goals to keep being true to where your path is going to take you.
Yeah. You got to pay attention. You got to be aware and look for those synchronicities, right?
Yeah, totally, man. Once those things start to happen, you're like, that's when things are flowing.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to find.
I wanted to drop back into mural making for a second.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start to execute? So you took us to the design phase and completing the design phase. Now, are you using a grid? Are you using a scribble grid, a projector, a combination of those three, or are you just looking at like, you know, the file on your phone?
Or like ETAM crew guys will like just have like a napkin of like this sketch. It's like this big and be painting like a wall that's that big. No, I don't do that. So yeah, I'm like a pretty like planning, like very like I don't know how to say it. Like it's all about execution for me, kind of like it's all about being able to plan as much as I can, prepare, so that when I get to that moment, it's just like I could be in it. You know, I've got all these variables controlled. So what I like to do is I like measure the whole wall to the foot. And like that create my Photoshop file to be like, let's say it's 10 by 10. That's easy. So I'll do 10 wide by 10 tall. And then I make my design. And I always go to the wall, and the first thing I do is measure the wall if the client told me, because it's usually not
a little
what they
different.
say. Yeah. So I always go measure it, and I lay out the file like perfectly because, you know, the squiggle grid to me is a very good way to get there quickly and do it. Which, if you don't know what the squiggle grid is, it's pretty much you're, you know, making just a bunch of marks. I'm sure somebody's maybe talked about it on the podcast maybe before. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's like basically
there's a couple of good videos.
XY axis of you know, columns and rows of letters, squiggles, just random little symbols, kind of.
Yeah, and you superimpose the image on top of it after you make the symbols and letters on the wall, and that's your way of seeing it. But for me, that means that you're only doing it to where the camera lens is. Meaning, like, if it's 100-foot tall wall and you're taking a picture, like, it's gonna be obscured for that angle. There's like it's like a sweet spot, you know, and that's like how you could do, you know, anamorphic stuff is like, it's the same way. Is like there is a sweet spot to where you view it. So it works amazingly. But for me, all my stuff is very organic and has a lot of like movement. So I really like to just like measure the wall, and I'll drop in Photoshop like grid lines on the rulers of like 2 foot or 3 foot lines, depending on how much details in each square. And I'll lay the whole thing out with a 6-foot stick. Like I'll go get like a 1x2 from Home Depot, and I'll mark it like a yardstick, and it's 6 feet. And I tape a level to it also.
Okay.
Just tape it up, and I'll hit the corners, the left side, and I'll go across. So I can look down and I can see these lines. Because, as you go 40 feet, if you're, marking an inch off as you go, it's like you kind of mess up. So I have like my left side and my right side, and then I use the level. And it may take a while, but I go all the way across the whole thing and I mark it out with dots so that if I need to go back in and get more information later, I have those dots always there. The squiggle grid, if you cover it, it's gone. So I always know it's 25 feet over, and I could drop another line to be a foot by a foot, or I could drop another line to be a 6 inches by 6 inches, like on the corner of this eyeball, so that you have to have in your mind when you're painting huge, you're up there and you're like, you can't see anything.
Right.
Like you're literally like looking at a blob and you're like, I hope it looks good.
Yeah.
If you mess up on your grid, you're in the wrong spot. Like you can't tell until you go down. So I like to be able to control those variables so that if I'm up there and I'm working on a 75 by 35 foot wall, which is the size of the next wall I'm working on.
Nice.
In the middle of it, I can like scroll up and be like, I'm 35 feet over. Where is my spot that I'm at? And then I'm breaking it down into these little squares at a time. I'm working on one square that's 3 by 3 foot at a time, and I get all the way across the thing. So that's how I control that moment. And then if you're want to talk about materials and stuff, I do everything nowadays is like I hit those dots instead of the grid lines. I'll hit them on the intersection points with spray paint. And then I just draw with spray paint. Nowadays, basically, unless if it's a flat background color, I'll use a paint sprayer. I try not to even roll it these days, because like work smarter, not harder,
right.
Because this is, in the end, I'm sure you've seen those like epic memes where it's just like, in the end, you're just like in the hot sun for hours and hours and hours with the headphones and the regulator. So, make it easier for yourself. But so I'll do like all of it with like all my different spray paint colors nowadays, because there's just like a speed and I started spray painting in 2019, actually.
Really?
So it's like,
wow,
it's pretty January of 2019. Well, I mean, like I spray painted like always, but I never like was like, I'm going to work on this color scheme to do this.
Right.
Yeah. And then I just did. And then actually the moment that it all changed is I was at Envision Festival and I was doing a portrait. And they got me house paints, and I did the background with spray paint. And then like the house paints were so dull compared to the colors. So I was like, oh, fuck, I got to do this with spray paint. I did it. And I was like, oh, sick.
I did it.
And then from there, so I forgot what so 2019, I was started spray painting. So I kind of just realized that it was like, it's just so much faster, you can do so many things with it. So going back to like a really technical background of what I was doing painting and color theory wise from that one professor at Savannah about realism and colors and hue, value, intensity, breaking down the levels of color. There's all these scales, and it's like, for my brain, I'm very like analytical. So it's like a spreadsheet of cans.
Totally.
Once you learn those colors, it's like I can go in so many directions to make it duller or brighter, or change the hue, which is the color on the color wheel, or the value of the colors. It's just like a yellow, you have the darkest value of that yellowish greenish color all the way to the lightest one. So it's nuts, man.
Hang on one second.
It's crazy.
Hang on. Yeah. So took a little pause there to sort of bring up a little handy dandy. Oh man, hang on. Is it not going to show because of my stupid background? No, it is. If you just like get it in the light, plenty. Oh, there we go.
Close to it, yeah. It's close enough. You can say.
Anyway,
there you go.
I'm going to try and hold it right there for everyone watching on the Patreon, and maybe
you could drop in a file.
Yes, I'm going to drop in a file, I think, because
there we go.
In terms of
it's
like
right here. Boop.
Yeah.
You one of those? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that just brings up my my loathing for that format of a video on TikTok and
Yeah,
Instagram.
for sure. Instructional videos. Well,
But
basically, we are talking instructional video, but
we
like
are, we
what we were
are.
talking about is how in spray paint, like you have all of these grids of color kind of like laid out.
Yeah.
Um, so it's very easy to like plan a color scheme
Yes.
and take like, you know, the range of the pinks or whatever. And this is a good scale that you could actually see is I do this kind of stuff all the time where I'm like, you know, grab every single pink from like Montana Gold, Montana Black, 94s,
Yeah.
Montana 94. And literally like, this is from like the red violet, you know, the most pink to the most violet
Yeah.
range, because like in all those flowers I'm doing, it's like those subtle moments of like, this is like, you know, it's a little bit
It's warmer.
peach, you know,
Yeah.
redder,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and it's like, so you see those little moments in there, and it's like those scales of color, just there's so many colors to pick from. So
Yeah.
for me, because like I can break the colors down in that way, it's like it opened up insane doors to be able to like get to those places of, you know, I don't paint with detail. I paint with like for perception,
Yeah.
you know. So how I break down color is in three categories: is hue, value, and intensity. So hue is the color on the color wheel. So
Right.
like Roy G. Biv. Intensity is the brightness to the dullness of the color. Like it could be purple and it could be really intense, but it could also be like the muddiest gray, but it's also
Still
purple.
purple. Yeah.
And then the value of the color. So like the natural value that purple is the darkest color, but yellow is the lightest color in value.
Mhm.
So that's the easiest way to like, once you start to talk about it that way, you understand it that way.
Yeah.
So
You sort of have
you
like
can,
an XYZ axis in your conceptually of where
totally.
exactly this color is going to fit and then where it fits into your design.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's like, that's like anything in life really, is like, you got to like teach yourself the language so that you could talk to yourself about it.
Yeah.
Like you don't know shit until you like,
Can
nobody knows anything,
can
by the way,
language
but
it.
just like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, exactly, man.
Yeah.
Like you got to like get told what it is, and you learn a lot on your own, but like, you know, it helps a lot sometimes. So like, what was I talking about before that? Was kind of just like breaking down those colors and stuff in the mural process.
Yes.
So you know, that's a great thing to explore, and it's a great way for like people who are scared to like grab spray paint and want to like branch out. It's like, just grab a couple of those colors, are perfectly set up, and you can like figure it out on that back wall in your backyard or whatever.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, so a lot of the other things that I do is like looking at the situation of the wall. Is like, what's the lift situation like? What's the axis going to be like? Is the space closed? Are you going to be able to paint? You know, just scheduling. That goes back to communication and stuff. Is like, there's so many logistical things that happen when you're doing bigger projects that like half the time you're just communicating and you're making
Right.
sure that all these things that you expect to be set up is not, unless you talk about it. So it's like, yeah, the lift situation, what condition is the wall in? Does it need to be sprayed with bleach to get the mildew off? Do you have to scrape the wall to get all this old paint off? Like this piece I'm about to do in Macon, Georgia, which I'm going to just drop this because I'm super stoked about it. I'm doing one at H&H restaurant in Macon, Georgia. It's Allman Brothers piece. It's going to be like
sick.
the whole band. It's like 75 foot by 35 foot. And it's a soul food place that has, it was kind of just like in an all black area. And these two women just, you know, were awesome there. And they created this restaurant, and they supported like the Allman Brothers kind of at the beginning when they lived in Macon. So we're kind of paying tribute to that, but that's going to be epic.
That's
right.
right.
That wall right now needs to be scraped because, you know, I could get there and it would be in a terrible position. So there's all these little moments
So are you
to look at.
Are you getting someone to do that part for you, like scrape the paint?
Yeah,
You're
we
like,
communicated about it, and they're going to take care of it because they're, you know, they want to get it done. They like the idea, so it's just, everything is different. Every situation, They may be like, I could send somebody for a charge, kind of thing, or just it's
you
the
gotta
more we talk about it,
Yeah.
gotta talk it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's a ton of information there. When you're doing a mural, how conscious are you of time and how like, I know
Oh
that you said
God.
that you like to have everything um, planned out, ready to roll right when you get there, but sometimes unforeseen things happen, and so
Yeah.
so are you
I'm
pricing
not.
based
I'm.
on square foot rather than time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I am. But I'm learning that like yeah, so I base everything on square foot. I charge a design fee, which has evolved over time, and I've gone up with what I charge, and then charge per revision, so that like a client can understand like I need to communicate what I want, because if I have to do it again, I have to pay for it. So
Right. Yeah.
that always helps. And then I do like a $15 and $25 a square foot right now. Sometimes it really just depends. Sometimes more, sometimes less. All depends on the situation.
Hmm.
And then I just like explain why they may be in that situation, and then cover materials, cover all of those things. Um, and then there's like an open-ended thing for like the accommodations and stuff, because there's the potential that it may rain. For like, I did this project in July that literally like it rained like every single day I painted,
Oh.
and I called it deluge of abundance, because like a deluge is like an insane amount of rain,
Right. Yeah.
but it was like about abundance. So it was just like this whole experience, man. Like the whole thing I went through was like a huge experience. And it was like all these things actually, like these synchronicities were like challenging me, but then it, kind of made through it at the end. But yeah, it's just like it goes back to like mental health in this practice too, is like the pressure that you lay on yourself, what you're giving back to yourself, how much rest you're giving yourself. So I've been talking to a lot of like my peers lately, is just like about saying no, and like giving myself an extra week in between, because like I've been saying yes for so long
Hmm.
that I'm still like, I have projects that I hope my clients are listening. I'm so sorry, I'm trying to get there. I don't know, it's just like it's hard to manage everything, as even myself now, like in like 7 or 8 years of doing this, it's like
Hmm.
it's so hard to manage all of these different aspects. But the more that you like just break it down and simplify it, it's like they kind of just get streamlined, and it starts to flow a little better. But
Yeah.
yeah, man, it's
Yeah.
all a balance in this thing.
Hell yeah. Well, yeah, we've covered a lot so far. I think we'll wrap it up here in a few more questions. But one thing I wanted to ask you about was the work itself, and I want to show people your work. And I actually haven't done this in a while on this show, but I'm gonna share the screen here. So um,
Cool.
here we are at your Instagram page. Um, and so I noticed this theme of kind of like growth, floral nature, kind of like nature centric stuff. Do you want to speak to that a little bit in terms of why you choose that as your main subject, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. It's on a couple of levels. It goes with, I'm just going to make a note so I stay on track.
Hmm.
As you've heard, I can ramble. Here we go. So, basically, like, yeah, so this is that piece actually, that's Deluge of Abundance, that
Oh,
I
sweet.
painted in Fort Lauderdale in June. I grew up down there, and I somehow expected it to not rain, even though it's like tropical storm season. So I was my own. Yeah, you set yourself up for shit sometimes. But
Hmm.
yeah. So talking about nature, and just like, I don't know, I kind of went with like looking at what I liked to do in my painting in all those years, and all like of working and like knowing about art, and like seeing the different subjects of different painters. And I always had a huge fucking pressure on me to like know what I was going to do as an artist.
Hmm.
And I don't think that now I've come to terms with like nobody knows what you're doing. It's like you're just like running with something. So
Yeah.
I noticed that like when I would be in nature, And like when I was traveling the country, like a ton, going to national parks, backpacking, and just like, even having like psychedelic experiences in nature where I'm like realizing these microcosms of the earth are kind of just like all wrapped up into these places and moments, and the world is like a perfect working system.
Right.
The way that the geology is, and the way that like our, if you introduce, just like a simple thing of like how you introduce wolves into like how they introduce wolves into like Yosemite Park, and the rivers changed
Yeah.
over time, and how there's like it's a working system of life and death. And there's just like this overall, like, I'm a super spiritual person, but like, I'm not necessarily religious, but like, I kind of like look at all teachings and stuff like that to just like find that spiritual moment. And I notice it most like in nature, and in those connections. And like, I see it in music and I see it in art a lot, but it's all experiential. So there's like that flow of life that's like happening in nature. And so like through painting a lot in the public sector, I kind of like, would be trying to paint certain portraits or certain things. And you start to, it's a social experiment. You're feeding off what the people walk up to you and say. A lot of the times we hear this, people say the same things over and over again, but like there's a reason why. Like what's it giving? Like why are they receiving in that way?
Yeah.
And the best thing about painting out in public is that like those people aren't going into a gallery to look at art and to be like, I want to give an opinion about this. Like those people walk in and they're like, they have the intention to give, to receive art.
Right.
People who walk around the corner, this family who just pulled up whatever was happening in their life, they're going to eat lunch around the corner.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're painting something, they're experiencing things in like a raw format. And people who may not be, keen art, seers and critiquers or whatever, receivers, they might not see a lot to like be able to receive something powerful, colorful, with these like perfect harmonies of nature. So like I would look at nature and say like, what can these people feel? Like, I don't want to like, I feel like there's a responsibility. Like I like giving a positivity. I like the idea of like, life can fucking suck. There's death, there's all this crazy shit. So like, I like to give a positive perspective and like in through what I do. And that like, when I'd be in those moments in nature, I'd be like feeling this moment and I'd be like, why is this happening? Because these colors are this way. And these, there's that emotional thing that happens through that. So experience. So then I started to represent it a lot. I do a lot of portraits and a lot of different stuff and see like that's, painting on surfboards. That's going back to like my niche, like what's my path. I started to go paint on surfboards. And, I work with a local shaper to do that, but I'm still going back to like some floral stuff. And so it started with that. It started with wanting to realize that like, there's a level of responsibility in painting in the public sector, in my opinion. Like there is the whole art for art's sake thing too, depending on the situation. But I also think that, I mean, if you're your authentic self, you're going to deliver something that people can vibe with.
Right.
But for me personally, it's just like, I'm a realist and like, I just like these colors and these like bright colors and harmonious things. So I like to deliver like these things that are like, work well with the public sector. And there's another thing that you can talk about here too, is like mentioning just like Andy Warhol and his like idea of just like, good business is good art, so I made a business pivot in my life. I want to live doing this.
Yeah.
I love what I do. And like, I was like, I'm going to paint shit that people vibe with. Like, and I want to touch, it's impossible to do, but I want to touch like everybody. And the thing that like is undoubtedly touches people is like science of color and like these harmonious color schemes, that shit like delivers something without anything. You could paint shapes and it delivers it if you can get your colors to be harmoniously, and there's ways of, studying that to figure that out. But then also just like painting those moments in nature, because people can vibe with flowers and people. So then when I give them that and I give them that realism, then it opens the doors for me to give some abstraction. Like, in this piece, like I work with these like areas of black and white that gives like a timeless feel to people. So there's an older generational connection to that. And then like these graphic,
it also makes the figure pop a lot more too. So getting back to that
in this one,
that scientific ordering of
tons
colors.
of color theory.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I'm limiting basically on that. The idea is like you're limiting the intensity and the saturation of those flowers in that space. So then perception wise, the warmest colors, warms advance, cools recede.
Hmm.
So, that's just like the science of it backing up. Obviously, there's like, the painting of it in the realist format too, but like using every tool you have is so important, breaking
Yeah.
down those color into the hue, value, intensity, sharp edges and hard edges. So that's what I was getting at is like I have these graphic elements in a lot of my stuff where I just kind of like cut it in half because like I did come from like this like psychedelic art kind of background where it's like glitchy and it's flowing and it's kind of like from that psychedelic movement that we've like experienced. And so like a lot of my color schemes come from like that realm. Like I think about, when I'm
Right.
be like tripping or something and having an experience and like seeing, trying to be keen of like what are like why are these matching. So like you look at like a wrapper of like a starburst thing and you're like, damn, I shouldn't eat that, but like that pink
They,
one looks so good. Why?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The color, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like
You're literally
this.
tapping into the hard wiring of the human perceptual system when you
That's the
really
idea.
when you really learn, what colors are going to work together. I think yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I really love this piece too. Um,
Yeah, man, that was a
so good.
powerful painting to do. Thank you. That was like when I did that, I was like, okay, I feel like I can do basically all of the things that I was, I just like never thought I could do a portrait on that size. When the first time I never, painted a portrait with spray paint too, I didn't think I could do that. And then I did it. So, this piece was for Art Republic in Jacksonville. And the idea behind this was actually, so it was like last year, in 2020, I was kind of like wanting to find my place and my voice and like how to represent, the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
Big part of that was being like a white artist. Honestly, like seeing where I stand in all of this and like how I didn't want to, I think it was like the moment for a lot of people to represent it with authenticity. So it took a long time to figure out my way to like represent what I can through my art. So that was
Yeah.
like the piece that I did. That was actually through a campaign that Art Republic did called Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is like the James Weldon Johnson song, which was like considered the Black national anthem. And it was like the 250th anniversary of it. So like this whole event um, was based on that. So this piece is called Uplift, but it's based on like a section of the lyrics,
Hmm.
But yeah, there was a lot of good people involved with that. It was like Hyro Vega was there and
Oh, hell
Golden
yeah.
305 and
Nice.
Urban Rubin. Yeah, a lot of Cooley Ross Art, who's an awesome Jacksonville painter, my brother. So yeah, man. It There's like a message to give. I don't know. There's like it doesn't
Totally.
always have to be just beautiful. Things can get weird and get abstract, but
Yeah.
there's like a responsibility with like public art. And so like, I'm going back to the Andy Warhol thing of good business is like there's opportunities out there from cities and stuff. If you looking through the right the right uh the right roads
Channels.
and
Yeah.
there it is, that's the word, channels, to see those opportunities. And the more that you build your portfolio to be applicable, to be accepted by these things in this scale, and to just like push that limit, then like you're going to become a contender for these things. And like there are like opportunities out there, that are like $50,000, $100,000 for like 100 foot by something, but it's like, through municipalities and things like that, because it's becoming wanted by these cities. So they're hard to get, but these are like the grants and stuff. And this comes back to like writing and trying to like learn as much formal kind of stuff as you can so that you can be that person too. You could always hire somebody too, but there's some shit out there that I'm trying to get it, boy.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes back to communication too. I know grant writing is it sounds very academic for someone who's like, I'm just an artist. But as I hope this podcast is teaching people, it's like when you say you're an artist, you're also a business and you're also a communicator, and you're all these different things. So yeah, looking into, I actually wrote down public art grant, um, hoping that we would come back to it because I think you mentioned it earlier. Um, are you do you kind of scour the web for that kind of thing?
Yeah, I got a couple secrets. I was trying to decide if I'm going to let them out. I don't know,
You don't have
but
to.
yeah, there's like good things. Like I will say, like call for entry
Yes,
is a good
cafe.
thing to look for. I think, yeah, cafe, exactly. Like if you're looking to do like that art fair circuit, which I was at one point in time, they also have like public art calls. So yeah, like I do, yeah, it's a balance. I was trying to do those mural festivals for a while. You know, that's a good way for people to see what you're doing on like the social circuit of things. But then there's like, I'm getting calls for jobs in places that I've done things. And a big thing back to the floral work is like, that stuff is just rolling now. You know, a lot
Yeah,
of it's
yeah.
just like, I just got a call this morning, like right before we were talking. It's like, they basically want like a South Florida floral thing because I've done it, a few times now. So it just kind of like it rolls in that kind of way. Forgot what I was going to say before.
Oh, we were talking about art grants, but
Oh, right. Yeah. So I do. Some of it comes to me, but then some of it, I seek out, a lot of these things now because there is a certain level still that I want to grow where I'm going. So I have the goals. I am where I am now, which was like a goal, and I still have goals of like where I want to
right.
be able to take it. Because then you start to think about things financially. And I'm 31, and
Yeah.
you know, you can get fucking tired, man. And so like you start to think about like what's the best way to build this as a business, and you don't want the pressure on yourself, but it's like, how much do you want to, like, you define success,
Right.
at that point. So but yeah, I'm looking for the grants, because they're the bigger ones. But
Yeah.
then there's a level of, I still do things for pleasure. I still do things that are coming to me that are businesses that I shouldn't do, but I'm trying to stop doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of projects come that are like great for me that I'm like, wow, they want to see what I can do as an artist. Great. Then I can flourish. And then I'm still trying to grow to that like bigger level of painting bigger buildings and
Yeah.
do a few of those a year. And then, it opens the door for me to like dive back into the studio, which is like the next step of where I need to go kind of too.
Nice. Well, Stephen, this has been an amazing podcast, and thank you so much for bringing your A game. And we'll leave with one final question, and that's kind of one that I ask most of my guests. If you could give advice to a younger muralist in particular, or a younger version of yourself, what would that be?
I that second part got me.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think a lot of the things I said today were really important, and I was gearing towards younger muralists and younger artists who are like in all those positions that I've kind of been in through the timeline of what I'm doing. And so I think a lot of those points were big, is just like staying at it if you feel it. Like it takes time, and I'm amazed at the growth because like, as as the years progress, I'm still like amazed at like what can happen over time. It takes a long time. You hone in your skills is like the most important thing. And when you're ready to flourish, I think like the best thing is to like just work, give yourself the time to like see what you're doing, make a lot of shit, make a
Right.
lot of garbage,
Yeah.
and just seek through it, be inspired, but then like find something that like speaks to you, and then like follow it. Just follow that path. It's not so much you, it's just like find those moments where you're like, I'm feeling good to do this, and you're doing it, and like let it flow, like just speak it speak it deep. It sounds cliche, but just like speak it from your heart, dude. Literally,
Yeah.
it's hard to open up, but like the more that you do it, it's like muscle memory, it's like practice. So you teach yourself, you get more in that rhythm of like getting closer to it all the time. You're never going to get there, ever.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, there we go.
For a never-ending chase. So there you go. That's a good way to end it.
Nice. Yes, I agree. Well, go check out Steven at Steven Teller Arts on Instagram.
Yep, Steven Teller Arts on Instagram, Facebook.
Thank you so much, Steven, and thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time. Thank you again for listening to another episode of Artsy AF Podcast. If you are interested in supporting the Patreon, that address is patreon.com/ArtsyAF Podcast. And I want to thank all my patrons. You guys keep this engine running. I couldn't do it without you. Go over there and check out the tiers I have available. It includes video, guest suggestions, patron-only posts, and some merchandise. Thank you again for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe. Do all those little things that help get Artsy AF into the consciousness of more and more people. Shout.